Welcome to the Lights Camera Pro podcast, where we interview entertainment pros about their careers and how they became successful in the industry. The secrets to their success here every week. Here's your host, Sean Ventura.
Hey everybody, welcome to the Lights Camera Pro podcast. I'm your host, Sean Ventura, and I just want to say go to Apple Podcasts and Spotify and subscribe, rate, and review. Hey everybody, we're going to do something a little bit different today. We are going to review season 2 of the Mandalorian Disney Plus series, and we're going to start with episode 1 today. We're going to try, because of my busy schedule, but we are going to try to do one every week when the episode comes out the next day or within a couple of days. So I look forward to that, and I hope you do too. So let's get right into the review. Why do people love The Mandalorian? It's all over social media. Everybody's talking about it. My friends are talking about it. I have 50-year-old friends talking about it. My 15-year-old son is texting me, "Dad, are you done watching The Mandalorian so I can watch it now?" I've even asked him to help out with the review and just give his 2 cents about what he thinks about the episode, because he really likes the show also. What is it? Is it the little green guy in the bucket, in the basket? Everybody loves Baby Yoda, right? The child. Why do I love it? Is it the nostalgia for the past? I saw Star Wars when I was 8 years old. The first one with Mark Hamill and Carrie Fisher and Harrison Ford. What is it? I don't know. It's so many different things. Probably has a lot to do with that cute little Baby Yoda, but it's a fun show. It's really well done. Jon Favreau directs it for Disney Plus, and he's got a lot of characters popping up here and there. The first season was great. The fight scene at the cantina, or canteen, whatever you call it, with Gina Carano and the Dark Forces was amazing, and the powers that Baby Yoda has to throw giant creatures around and throw people around is pretty amazing and fun too. So it's a fun series. It's an escape. Everybody loves it. Okay, here we go. We're going to get right into it. We are going to get into season 2, episode 9, The Marshal. Okay, at the beginning of the episode, we are on some unknown planet, and the bouncer says, "Enjoy the fights," as they go in. The Mandalorian is there to see a one-eyed man who is sitting by ringside. Happens to be John Leguizamo who's playing him. Doesn't look like John Leguizamo at all, but the man says, "Let's not talk business right now. Sit down and watch the fight, and then we'll talk business." Well, it turns out that the one-eyed man betrays Mandalorian, we'll call him Mando, and all these guys pull guns on him, and then he continues to fight everyone while Baby Yoda watches in fear, hides in his bucket. I can't remember which one happened. And then after some fights happen, he gets some information from the one-eyed man who's hanging upside down that there's definitely a Mandalorian on the planet of Tatooine, which we all know from episode 1 of Star Wars. They also went there last season. And so Mando sets off with Baby Yoda, the child, to Tatooine to find this other Mandalorian, because he wants to find his own kind, because they'll be able to find Baby Yoda's kind and bring him back to his people. As we see Mando's ship fly into Tatooine, we see the bantha creature, which is like a woolly mammoth, which we've seen before in Star Wars, on Tatooine. And on top of him is a Tusken Raider, which we've also seen before. So it's kind of familiar, even though this is a new series. And he flies into the mechanic shop, Pelimoto, and her droids greet him and Baby Yoda. And he gets some information from Peli, who is played by Amy Sedaris, that the Mandalorian that he's looking for is probably in this mining town. So he borrows a speeder bike from her and jets off with his little green friend to find the other Mandalorian. When Mando comes up on the small mining town, it has some suspicious people living there. He stops at a bar and asks about people like him, and the marshal shows up dressed just like him, like a Mandalorian. He takes off his helmet to offer Mando a drink, and Mando says, "We never take off our helmet. Take off your armor. You are not a Mandalorian. Do it now or I will." Right here in front of the kid, says the marshal, who's played by Timothy Oliphant. The Mandalorian. Mando says, "He's seen worse." The bar starts shaking and a giant worm shark comes out and eats the bantha. The marshal calls it the crate dragon. "Help me kill it and I will give you the armor," the marshal tells Mando. Mando agrees. This is so cool because Tatooine is in the first Star Wars movie where Luke's aunt and uncle lived. It looks the same as it did 40 years ago. This is an episode that mixes in the old and the new. So we've got all these buildings that look like the first Star Wars. We've got them riding on the land speeders, the speed bikes, and people and the costumes are similar, but now we're in present day 2020 watching this. So it's an incredibly fun mix of old and new. The marshal now tells the story of the mining town and how it was overtaken and turned into a slave town by the mining company. He escapes town during a shootout and is rescued by the Jawas, which are the little tiny red-eyed guys who have the giant trash compactor thing, and they wear these little burlap brown sacks, and they're like 2 feet tall. The Jawas. And the Jawas take him into their big trash compactor, and he sees a Mandalorian's helmet and armor on the wall, and he has these crystals, and he trades them for some water and the Mandalorian armor. He returns to town and has a laser gun and shoots the mining soldiers, kills a bunch of them at a bar, and the rest of them drive away in a vehicle, and he shoots a rocket from the back of his backpack and blows them up. Okay, did that bother anyone else? I just got to talk about this really quickly because I understand he has the suit. I understand he gets the gun, the laser gun, kills some people. That all makes sense. But to shoot a rocket from your backpack 100 feet away at a moving vehicle and hit it when you just got it like an hour ago seems impossible, and I hate it when things are impossible. So that just kind of bothered me, and I moved on, but I was wondering if it bothered anybody else. So we are back to the Marshal and the Mandalorian driving into the desert, and they come upon some ferocious lizard dogs that have all these scales like lizards, but they look like these huge dogs from alien movies or something with huge fangs. And the Mandalorian just sort of grunts at it and whistles at it, and the dog comes over and he starts petting the dog and calming him down. But I knew it. I called it. I said, when they're in the desert, they're going to come upon someone from Tatooine, and you know who they are. They are the Sand People. And the Sand People are so creepy. And let me just say this. The Sand People would never be friends with Obi-Wan and Luke. But we see in a minute that they're actually going to be friends with the Mandalorian and the Marshal, which is crazy to me. But I'll explain that in a minute. But the Sand People have this face that has like a leather vinyl mouth that's closed in, and then they have these 2 tubes for eyes. It looks like it might just be a mask that they wear so that they can see in the sand and the blowing wind, and these 2 metal tubes coming out of their eyes, and these 2 little tubes for their nose, and they just have this burlap all over them, and they just look so creepy. They look like almost like scarecrow dolls or something if you've never seen them before, but they've just always creeped me out since I was a little kid. So the Mandalorian, the Marshal, and the Sand People make a fire, and they're talking about how they're going to join together and kill this crate dragon, because the crate dragon is a problem for the Sand People and for this Marshal in the town because it keeps eating people and eating their animals and they have to get rid of it or else they can't survive. So they're going to join together. And the Mandalorian speaks the sand person language, which is a grunt with some sign language. And they're sitting around a fire. And one of the lizard dogs is looking at baby Yoda and licking its lips like, I want to eat that little baby Yoda. And baby Yoda's like, don't eat me. But then the marshal gets in a fight with one of the sand people. And the Mandalorian says, we have to work together or we're all going to die. And they're like, okay. Okay, so they come up with a plan with the sand people to go to the Great Dragon's lair and offer him a bantha, the woolly mammoth creature. And they say if he eats a lot, he'll be asleep. The sand people say this. And then when he's asleep, we'll kill it. Well, a sand person brings, I don't know any other way to say that than a sand person. A sand person brings the bantha up to the mouth of his cave, his lair, and hits a post and ties the bantha to it, and the bantha's trying to get away. But, oops, the Great Dragon comes out and eats the sand person, not the bantha. So he's not full, and he killed the person. So Mando and the marshal go back to town, and they have a meeting in the town bar, and they ask the town to work together with the sand people who in the past have stolen their crops or stolen their animals. So they hate them, but ask them to work together to kill this Great Dragon. They say that the sand people have agreed. Reluctantly, the townspeople say that they will. So they go to this sort of outpost with all these bombs and weapons and stock up all these banthas when the sand people come to town. And there's a little fight there between the townspeople and the sand people. But once again, the marshal says, hey, calm down. We got to do this so we can get the Great Dragon together. So they all take a ton of explosives to the dragon's cave and some weapons. And the townspeople go and the sand people and the Mandalorian, Baby Yoda, and the marshal. And they're all going to kill the Great Dragon. The dragon is asleep because one of the sand people listen to the ground. They can hear it, vibrating. So they know it's asleep. And they plant all these explosives in the sand. And then they set up all these sort of catapult harpoons everywhere that they can shoot into the Great Dragon, which once again looks like a giant worm with a mouth and no eyes and these giant teeth. And I can't even describe. It's probably the size of a football field. It's that big. It's this giant monster who lives in the sand. So they get all set up and they set up these bombs in the sand and they have a detonator and they have this plan to lure out the dragon, get him above the bombs in the sand and just blow him up. Well, it doesn't work out that way. They wake him up, the dragon comes out, but he kind of pulls away and goes into the sand, even though they shoot all these harpoons into him and they shoot 1,000,000 rounds of weapons into him. The Mondos fly into the air and shoot it, which is pretty cool because they fly up in the air on these backpacks, rockets, and then they're just about to get eaten by the giant worm. He comes off the top of this mountain, the giant Great Dragon, and they fly out of the way. Mando gets the detonator, pushes this rocket, and the other marshal goes flying away, and he takes a bantha as bait for the Great Dragon, and he's standing there with this woolly mammoth creature, and the woolly mammoth creature is so afraid he rips the rope out of the ground that was pegged in, and he's getting away. So the Mandalorian has to hold him there with a rope while this giant worm shark Great Dragon thing is coming towards him and basically has to get eaten. The only way that he gets him to eat the bantha, which is covered with tons and tons of explosives, enough to blow up this giant worm, is that he goes into his mouth also. So the Great Dragon eats the Mandalorian and the bantha, goes underground, and then he comes up out of the ground like 30 seconds later. And we all know that the Mandalorian has some sort of lightning bolt taser thing, and he's set that off inside the worm's mouth, the Great Dragon's mouth, and it's opened up, and he escapes through his rocket backpack and eats the bantha, and then the bantha explodes inside him with like 100 explosives on him and blows up and kills the worm. So it's very, very dramatic. They go back to town, and the marshal gives Mando the Mandalorian armor, and they promise to meet again. They thank each other for helping each other. Mando rides off into the sunset on his speeder bike with Baby Yoda at his side, and we see a bald man watching him as he rides by. I'm sure we will find out who it is in episode 2. There's been some speculation that it's Jango Fett, who possibly at one point was also Boba Fett, but people have revealed that they know who the actor is from one of the Star Wars movies. And I just want to say one more thing. I saw someone, and I won't say who it is, that gave this episode a C+ rating. And they're missing the point. This show is more than a rating. It's an event that makes people look forward to every week where they can escape to another world and even their childhood and remember the good things in life, like going to the movies with your dad or escaping to another planet when the world sucks right now. And it's such a cool episode. And these people are doing such an amazing job that saying that it's a C+ is really just... not a good review. Let's just put it that way. So let's do a rating for me. I always do ratings, and I'll just say that they did an excellent job on this episode. But for me, it was probably a 7 out of 10 for the actual episode. But because it was on Tatooine, and that was from the first Star Wars movie, and I saw the same buildings and architecture and costumes, and we saw the Banthas and the Jawas and the Sand People. It was so cool to go back to that place where I was 8 years old watching Star Wars, that I really give it an 8 out of 10 for this episode. Yeah, that's my rating. This is one last thing. Somebody says, is that Boba Fett's armor that the Marshal has on? Somebody asked that. It's a speculation. It does look kind of like the same color as Boba Fett's armor. So at the end, when Mando gets it and he's going to bring it back to him, maybe in a future episode, we see Boba Fett. We'll see. All right. See you next time.
Thanks for listening to the Lights Camera Pro podcast, where entertainment pros talk about how they made their dream into a career.
Go to Apple Podcasts and Spotify and subscribe, rate, and review. Thanks to Bob Juergens for the Rockin' VO and Joseph McDade for the music. So next week, we will see you for episode 10. If you like this episode, subscribe, rate, and review on Apple Podcasts or wherever you are listening, and tell your friends to share on social media. And thanks. All right, see you next time.